newberryboston.com, and welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneur's Grill. Today we're webcasting live from the FutureM conference at the Heinz Convention Center. Thanks for watching our webcast. We have a really cool startup presentation for you, followed by some grilling and some feedback from Todd Dagres of Spark Capital. And if you're watching the webcast, you can ask questions that we'll present on your behalf. If you're here in the live studio audience, we'll have roving mics for you. Today we have Bob Houvener, who's joined us with Rick Malagotti from an interesting startup company called Physical Apps, which is physically located in New Boston, New Hampshire, right? Nashua, New Hampshire. All right. I was close. I was in the right neck of the woods.
The guitar guy was from New Boston. Yeah.
The guitar guy was from New Boston. Yeah. All right. So we're bringing you guys south for your presentations today. And I'm really excited to see the product. Giving you a grilling is Todd Dagres from Spark Capital on Newbury Street. And tell us just a little bit, maybe before we get into the official pitch, do you guys have any background in sporting equipment or toys, or is it kind of an idea that just kind of came to you?
Right. So it actually came to me. My sister-in-law came to me because I've got a lot of patents, and she came to me and she said, "Hey, I got this idea." You know, she's a teacher in the Fairfield, Connecticut school district. She said, "Hey, I'm going to take a beach ball. I'm going to write questions on it. I'm going to throw it around my classroom. I need to wake the kids up, get them moving instead of sitting at a desk." So she did this, and she said, "Hey, can you make this happen for me? I want to productize this." Well, it was a good idea. The problem was a teacher had patented it about 10 years ago, so that sort of went away. So I came back, and I'm more of an electronics guy, computer software entrepreneur. And I said, geez, I wonder, could we take a ball and put a computer in it? And you know, I figured it all out. You'd have to charge $150. So we sort of put that on the shelf. Then my BlackBerry died. I got a Droid phone. And I'm driving along about a day later, and I said, I'm playing with this thing. It's totally awesome. I can download apps and everything to it. And I said, we've got everything we need right here to put in that ball if we could just protect it. So I went home, got out my wife's carving knife, and started slicing up foam. Made a little prototype with the now broken BlackBerry, and showed it to my sister-in-law and said, "Hey, you want to go for this? This looks like pretty cool." And so we could do the same thing. There's about 50 million of these smart devices sold every month, iPod, iPhone, Android devices. And essentially they've got accelerometers, gyros, everything you need. You just need to protect it. And so for all kinds of different applications, from her educational applications to rehabilitation, learning for toddlers, things like that, we said, hey, let's go for it. I put out, feelers in my network. I said I need somebody in the industry because I had no clue about a consumer product. So I was fortunate enough to meet up with Rick, and he has 15 years selling consumer products, action sports, toys, etc. And I pitched him in my dining room, and from there we were off and running.
All right, cool. So I don't know how you want to use your 2 minutes of pitching. If you want to do some demoing, I'm envisioning these things flying around the room here. We're going to have a giant rave at the Heinz Convention Center here.
Yeah. So it's a really simple concept. We're building an ecosystem that ties together the physical device, the enablers, and apps that enable this. So it can be as simple as something like Hot Potato. So you load Hot Potato, an app, off of iTunes onto here. You load it into the ball like this. So now you've got it in there. And then you would just start the app, and you can throw it around. You can bounce it off the floor.
You don't mind if I throw it to someone in the audience?
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, who's good at catching? I don't want to throw it too close.
Yeah, so there you go.
Nice catch.
So these are prototypes. If you like this one, you'll really love the real one. But the whole idea is, advanced games. They can be very simple games like Hot Potato. We've got for toddlers, we have ABC learning games, things like that. And then we have more advanced ones as part of the ecosystem where you can actually talk out of the phone up to Amazon, to our servers up there in our ecosystem, our game center, back down to, say, your smart TV, your iPod, or whatever. And so the classic example of this is our bowling game. And it's essentially a Wii experience, but you don't need the Wii anymore. You've already got everything. So for essentially an order of magnitude less cost, you get a similar experience. And we'll show you that in just a second here. But essentially, you roll the ball along. We talk up to Amazon. You could be in Boston.
I'm imagining my son coming home from the park saying, like, Dad, I can't play outside today. The Amazon cloud is down.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because
It was down yesterday.
Yeah, it was for like an hour. And but it's really interesting because especially with 4G, I mean, you can play this thing right on the back porch. I mean, it's so much fun. You go to the airport, you can be sitting there, you're waiting for your flight, and this is just really scratching the surface of what you could actually do with the technology. So our intellectual property is essentially if you build something to protect the phone from tossing, kicking, throwing, whatever, that's part of our environment, our intellectual property. And it's funny because the patent office has actually gotten back to us twice in the last 6 months. I mean, I've got patents going back 15 years. I've never gotten a call like this. And our attorney calls me up and she says, well, the patent office is apologizing to us because they can't figure out where to go with this in the patent office because they've never heard of it before. Well, as an entrepreneur, that's exactly what you want to hear. And so it's a lot of fun. Indoors, outdoors. Our target market to start with ranges from toddlers, just a year old that are rolling it around and it says moo, something like that, to, kids in their dorm room. We've got multiple third parties that are developing apps for it now. We'll be rolling it out for Christmas. We were invited out to Apple, and they liked it. They picked up the phone, and a few major retailers are ready to take them. So we've worked pretty much the whole world with people that can actually manufacture them, and it turns out that we have a company right here in the U.S. that's the best at it. And so that final version is just going into manufacturing. And but again, what we want is the ecosystem that lets developers all over the world develop apps for this new thing, ties it together with physical shapes. We're starting out with this, but we expect it'll mostly be a license play where we'll license others. We've got most of major manufacturers that have talked to us. And the idea is just slice it into different rehabilitation, learning, physical fun. So the most important thing is essentially instead of doing this, with your phone, now you're up, the kids are around. And I have 6 and 12-year-old daughters, and I started seeing that, sitting on the couch stuff. And so I think this is just fantastic, the idea that they, sit there and play around with it physically.
So before we go to Todd, one of our online viewers wants to see the bowling demo. They say I'm not envisioning yet how that works.
Yeah, so we'll just show you a simple one here.
Yeah, the ball only.
Yep, that's fine. So essentially, you can see there you got a bowling alley, and so you essentially on the phone you downloaded your app, you put it in. Yep, go ahead, and so when you roll that along, we use the accelerometer, the gyro, all the things that are in these phones, and so you can then see the bowling, which they just did, and so on the so it's just like a Wii, and we can again talk out of there to some other device and display it. Yeah. So again, it's like scratching the surface. These sort of apps, but there's just all kinds of really fun apps, and the funnest thing is the last month or so we've had people come to us and actually say, well, I've got 100 apps that are already doing this sporting stuff. Can we modify my apps to work in this environment? And the coolest apps, they're already cool. They've already got millions of downloads.
So I'm already thinking like, okay, you put in a football form factor, and the phone knows how far I've thrown the football, right? And what the hang time was.
A training aid, exactly. So those are about $2,500 today. We'll do it for $25 or $29.
Cool.
Won't be exactly the same fidelity, but do you think the high school coach is going to care? He won't. So yeah, it's a very fun thing, and it's just about ready to hit the market.
Cool. And are you guys both on this full time now, or are you still doing day jobs?
Yeah, no, pretty much. Rick's been on it full time for a year and a half, and we actually met with a very small number of potential funders here in Boston. We got the advice of go get some angel money, and we did that. And we rolled it up, and it's been a lot of fun, and we're just getting ready to take it and launch it.
That was really good advice, too. It was from
Yeah.
a really bright guy, I think, a really bright VC.
Yeah. So it's been fun, and yeah.
All right, so these are entrepreneurs you have met before.
Yeah.
Okay.
3 years ago?
I didn't know.
It was about a year and a half.
A year and a
last
half.
August. Yeah.
3 with the wind chill, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it worked out great, and actually I would, just to add a compliment to that, Todd is actually the one that said, you really ought to be thinking of this as an ecosystem, and boy, did that accelerate things, because as soon as we thought about it, just that little tweak on what you're trying to do, it just blossomed. And so we launched it physically at Toy Fair last year in New York City, which is the biggest toy fair of the year. And it won the Product of the Year from Popular Science and Good Housekeeping, and we went from 0 to 65,000 hits on Google in 3 days. And we were on the front page of Yahoo for 2 days straight. And essentially, we had to rein in the marketing. And we have, lots of interest, and we're ready to go.
All right, so you've given them some advice in the past. You haven't invested in them. What questions would you ask about kind of where it's at?
Thank God I gave them advice that didn't stink. Anyway, at least I don't think it did. But what would I say now?
Yeah.
Well, the reason I gave them that advice is they had a good idea. But a good idea is not always a good business. And I was thinking if you could get the patent on this, the patent to me was what would be really valuable. So the ball itself, don't get focused on the ball. Forget about the ball. The ball is just the packaging, right? What is valuable here is the patent associated with having an application in a smart device enclosed for protection purposes, but also for game playing purposes. I thought that was valuable, but I wanted to understand, I wanted to see if they could get a patent, and I wanted to see if that patent would hold up, and I wanted to also understand what applications might become, kind of arise. It's like there's millions of smart people out there. You give people a platform, they'll build apps for it if it's a compelling platform. So, I think this is, they've definitely come a long way since I first saw them. It's still a ball. It was a ball before, but before it was a ball with the notion of having an app in it, and now it really is a platform, a virtual platform that happens to be today enclosed in a ball. So I think it's quite interesting. So did you get the patent awarded and all that?
Not awarded yet, but we actually have 5 patents that are filed at this point.
Yeah.
And the first patent, the feedback we've gotten both international in our PCT and our domestic patent, it's all very good feedback so far, and I would say in the next 6 months we should get it
They
granted.
already have these in China.
Yeah, well, it's not as easy as you think, let me tell you. We've found about 5 manufacturers that thought they could manufacture it, and we've found a couple that can.
Yeah.
And,
No, I'm sure it's not easy.
yeah.
So I want to know, Bob, about kicking, because it looks like that little window, like if you had the right size foot,
Yeah.
when you're playing soccer with it, that might be the end of my iPhone screen.
Yeah, we can't go into it right now, but there's actually, this will handle about 90% of the physical stuff that we can think of doing with it. There's a little bit larger one that you'll need if you have, that you're like me and you like your Droid Razor. It's not going to fit in the standard ball, so we may go with larger models. And then there's an evolution of the concept, part of the ecosystem, that'll account for the fact that you may not want your phone in the ball, but you want similar capabilities. And that evolves from balls to little punching bags. When you were a kid, you had the little blow-up punching bag with a weight in the bottom. And now imagine that, where you stick your phone in it and you punch it and you play with it, and it's on TV and you're part of a scene and you're playing with your neighbor. So it's, again, this is just scratching the surface of this idea of physical enablers for in an ecosystem. And the other one, a really simple one that people like is, imagine this, and it looks like a kettlebell. And so say your mother had a stroke and she's getting rehabilitated, so she takes that and she lifts it up and she has her phone in it. Well, at the end of that, it sends a report to her physical therapist. He looks at, how much did she lift it, what time of day did she do, et cetera. And these are all just an evolution of this concept of, not sitting there doing this, there's as much power in this thing as there is in, a 5-year-old console that you pay $250 for, and it gets better all the time. So why not use that? Most of the world will never be able to afford a console. $250. That's how much they make in 2 years.
Yeah.
But they have a smartphone.
I
So
think there's a question in the room here in the back. Yes.
You're talking about building a platform for this, and I agree that that sounds like a great idea. My question is, are you planning on monetizing from someone else building an app that works with your ball? So what would stop me as a developer building an app that you just put into the ball and works, and you get nothing out of it?
Right, so most of those apps, well, first of all, we could just, in our business plan, we have contingencies for doing things like that. But as far as an enforcement mechanism, you're going to probably want to sell that on iTunes or through one of the good Android stores. And so that's an enforcement mechanism where we can, actually go in and get you taken off of that if you're infringing on our IP. Now, we think there's a better way to do it, though. If we have an SDK that makes your job much easier, then it might be worth it for you to use that SDK, so you can concentrate on your game or your experience and not on how a sensor works. And then you will actually put your app up on our website, and that'll help narrow you down from the 5 million apps or whatever down to maybe 1,000 or 2. And if we take 20–30% of that, you might think that's a really good deal. So we're trying to incentivize people to sort of play with us. The other thing is that these apps are $1.99 to $4.99 versus essentially free for most apps today. The reason we can do that is because people compare it to a $30 to $50 Wii app or Kinetic app. And so it's an order of magnitude less cost, but for a developer, it's a whole lot more revenue for them. So if they can sell apps at $4.99, I mean, that's a big deal. So we feel there's ways to incentivize developers.
But for an iOS, for example, the app would have to go into the App Store anyway, because that's
Correct.
the only way to get it. So
Correct.
Apple would get 30%, you would get 30–40%. Okay.
Yeah.
And someone trickled down to the developer.
Yeah, so we have 3 revenue streams. We have the apps, we have our own apps that we pay people to develop where we get the whole 70%. We have the physical goods, and then we have licensing of other people making these, which is eventually the way we'll go.
Let's take one last question in the back here.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how are you branding this for the Christmas holiday? Will it be white labeled or your own? Will it be both Toys R Us brand plus your own brand?
No, we're building our own brand. Physical Apps is the parent company, and we're calling this TheO. So we'll be marketing and selling it under the TheO brand, but we'll have it available for licensing for private labeling going forward.
Cool. Best of luck.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to mention also to follow up on what Bob was saying, with our platform and with this ecosystem, customer acquisition, we make margin on customer acquisition. We're selling this at retail brick and mortar locations where people see it. It's an entry-level price point, barely above impulse. And once somebody buys this product, this physical enabler, in this case the ball or whatever geometry we use, we make margin on that sale, and then we make a continuation of margin or an annuity on the app sales and app licenses and additional product sales, accessories, and so on.
Cool. So Todd, what's your reaction at this stage? Is it the kind of thing that, I mean, when you first met with these guys, did you say, well, this is not really a product that Spark would invest in, but here's some advice, and has anything changed?
It was a little different than that. It was, like I said earlier, we wanted to see if the patent was feasible. I think a lot of the value here is in the patent, because obviously other people could put a iPhone in a foam ball.
Right.
Right? And if these guys have a patent that protects that, then it creates a market opportunity for them that's pretty unique. And then the next question is, how big can this be? The biggest test and the most important test that we have for any company we evaluate is how big could it be? If things work out, how big a company could this be? Could it be valuable? Because it has to be, a few $100 million in value for us to, be involved, because that's just the way this business works. And I'd have to evaluate this and say, how many apps could they sell? How many balls could they sell? They have several, streams of revenue here. You like one killer app, though, because that's really what drives everything. So if the killer app is a ball that you put this into that comes with 10 apps, that may be enough to get this thing going, and then it becomes a platform and goes on from there. So based on where they are now, I would meet with them. So whether this is the first meeting, there'd be a second date. If this is not the first meeting, there'd be a first meeting. It's in our kind of realm. We're very comfortable with consumer. More than half our companies are direct-to-consumer companies. It's a little bit more physical, a lot more physical than the average company that we invest in. We don't typically like to invest in consumer electronics products because it's a very difficult business to be in. The margin gets sucked out pretty easily. Distribution's a problem, inventory, all that good stuff. But this could actually be more of an ecosystem where it's a royalty model, a licensing model, and I think the fact that they're selling products themselves as a way to seed the market and get the platform going makes sense here, but I would evaluate it far beyond their own physical goods.
So you would say that at some point they're going to need some money to kind of market this, to promote it, to build.
If you're building it, it costs money to build a brand. So if they want to build a brand, it costs money. To manufacture physical goods, it costs money. To get into distribution, you basically pay to get people to sell your product. So that's expensive as well. I think PR helps, but there has to be advertising and marketing here. So what I like to see is a very unique product with some protection, which I think they're on their way to getting. And then I like to see the opportunity for them to build a big business based on the advantage that they have. And right now, I would say they're getting close to the point where I could conclude whether they're going to be able to do it or not. And that's the point at which we like to get involved. We look for patterns, but we like to see the pattern early, because if we see the pattern late, we're late.
Mm-hmm. And are you guys in the process of trying to raise some money for the launch right now, or where are you at?
Yeah, so essentially, like I say, we raised our first round with angels pretty much within a month or two after we met with Todd. He sort of cemented, some thoughts we had. And then after Toy Fair, a bunch of our investors came back to us and they were like, can we get some more in on this a little more? So we raised another little round. And then over the last, probably 3 or 4 months, we've just been sort of sampling the market and trying to make a decision. Do we do another angel round, or do we go? We don't need that much capital. Like Rick said, this isn't $25 million. I mean, when we sell these, customers get acquired through selling this. So we're trying to make the decision right now. Do we, essentially do an A round? And we think we're getting close to that, because everything is happening much quicker than we had imagined it would, and it's the right time to sort of flesh out everything and get it going.
Cool.
So,
well, good luck with that. I want to thank Todd, thank Bob, thank Rick, and thank you for all your great questions and for watching.